Your live, interactive, your voice, your future coverage will begin shortly. Your voice, your future coverage with CBS 13 News starts right now.
And hello, good evening. Welcome to our CBS 13 Bangor Daily News live stream here tonight on the Your Voice, Your Future 1 week out from the election. I am Gregg Lagerquist, joined once again by Mike Shepard. Mike, great to have you here again tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, Greg.
Well, we've been and first of all, let me acknowledge I love your room there that you're working from. You've got that is some great political memorabilia behind you there.
This is mostly my personal collection. There are a couple pieces on loan, but this is the Bangor Daily News State House Bureau right here in Augusta. So.
That is awesome. All right, well, thank you. So again, we're just launching this discussion tonight. Frankly, this is your forum, folks at home who may be watching us tonight. We are 1 week away from the election. Let us know in the comments. That's the way this is going to go. Mike and I, obviously, we've already proven we can talk a long time about politics and about what's going on, and certainly we'll share our thoughts here tonight. But let us know, like, for example, where you're watching from tonight. What issues matter to you? Jump in the comment section. Our only thing is, kind of keep it clean. Obviously, strong opinions welcome, but please, kind of keep it clean if you would. Cameron lets us know right away. He's watching us right now from Auburn. Thanks for jumping in here. I appreciate it there, Cameron. So, Mike, here we are, 1 week to go from the election. And we should note, Mike, as you and I have talked about before, 1 day out from the election, but the absentee voting started several weeks ago. And in fact, I think we're up to about 1 in 6 registered voters, like 150,000 people have already submitted their absentee ballots. So we're essentially already underway.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's tons of voters already. I think I usually go by the requests, and there were 211,000 requests as of yesterday. So Democrats have gotten about 50% of those. They've come to kind of dominate early voting. So we should see pretty heavy Republican turnout on election day to kind of bring that back into back into whack kind of. But yeah, we've talked about October surprises in the past, right? That the old cliche of things that could surprise. Well, not as many people around to be surprised these days. So that's a lot of people couldn't get their ballot back if they wanted to. So that's part of elections now. It's earlier and earlier.
It's part of the way it goes, and we kind of talk about it, like Mike, for those who saw it. And you can still watch it online, by the way, at WGME.com and BangorDailyNews.com. Mike and I moderated a debate a week ago yesterday. And that's part of the conversation we have about what date do you pick to have these debates? Because, again, you got to recognize that there are people who are deciding late, but there are also a lot of people who are deciding early and voting already. So that, that's part of the calculus.
Yeah, I mean, we've moved up a lot of the election coverage that we normally would do, just helping people figure out when the deadlines are, right? Asking candidates for their stances in legislative races. We've moved that up at the BDN earlier and earlier because, frankly, people need it earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. One of the issues that popped up on the campaign trail today was this whole issue. As we jump into the issues, let's talk about the governor's race here, Mike, right off the top. Yep. Again, we're 1 week out from election day. We want to know what issues you care about. One issue we saw that the gubernatorial campaigns care about is this whole issue of inflation. In case you missed it, there was a hot mic. I don't want to say a hot mic, actually. There's probably a tracker at an event in Lewiston at Bates College. Again, the candidates know this. There's always a sort of an opposition camera following you around everywhere on the campaign trail. There was some audio from Governor Mills over the weekend speaking at an event at Bates College in Lewiston, in which she said that inflation was a distraction. In context, she said inflation the GOP is using inflation as a distraction. She said it is a major issue, one we have to work on, but that abortion rights remains a major issue. So, but Republicans kind of seized on that word, calling inflation a distraction, and they've run with it today, Mike.
Yeah, and we had the main GOP chair in Portland today holding a press conference on that. It looks like Bruce Poliquin and Paula Page will be in Bangor tomorrow, talking about actually Dysarts and Herman talking about heating oil prices. So this is the closing pitch, right? We had an abortion rights rally in Portland today with Governor Mills, and this election has been really stark, right? And it was in the spring, it looked like Republicans were going to have a really good year. The inflation issue was running really hot. Gas prices were soaring. The summer was a little different, right? Democrats got some momentum back around the end of federal abortion rights, right? And now we have this kind of we're sort of meeting back in the middle here, and we're somewhere between those two poles. We don't exactly know where, but that's going to make for a really interesting last week here.
Yeah, and I know that the candidates have obviously tried to make abortion a major issue. I'm sorry, excuse me, I should say one side is trying to make it a major issue. And because of what you just talked about there, Mike, the fact that we did see that issue after the Supreme Court essentially struck down Roe v. Wade this summer with the Dobbs ruling, they basically saw that as a major rallying cry. The Democrats did, and they wanted to, obviously definitely got momentum for that over the summer. The question at the time, and it remains now, is how much that momentum carries all the way through the election. And I think that inflation, we always knew, unless it got under control, was going to be an issue. And I think the fact that gas prices started ticking up again over the last month or so, the fact that inflation has remained so stubborn, I do think it is, once again, as you said, sort of risen back to the top and a lot of voters as they now make decisions. And again, if that's the number one issue, as most people head into the polls, that's not a good sign for Democrats. Not necessarily, in the governor's race, although I think it is a factor there as well, but it's a major factor nationally for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And look, this is how politics has worked for a long time, right? We've had, depending on who you blame, it doesn't matter really who you blame. If you're caught with the seat at the wrong time, it's gonna be tough for you. And this is a midterm election. The party in power always takes a bath, just about historically in those elections. So, that's where we are. And that's kind of the conventional wisdom is bumping up against a little bit of this abortion and just the environment in Maine. But that's where it's not unexpected that we are where we are. This is kind of what it's always like.
Yeah, I agree. And again, as we pop up a question here on our board there, have you already voted already? Let us know in the comments right now, and we can talk about that. And by the way, Tish, I think from Oakland just jumped in. We saw a couple other people's locations pop up on the screen there, and appreciate everyone who's joining us for this conversation. Really, this is again for you, Mike Shepard, Gregg Lagerquist. Again, we're here to talk about the state of the election 1 week out from election day. We want to know what you care about. We can certainly talk about what we're seeing, and we're going to do that over the next roughly half hour or so. But we want to hear from you. What do you care about? What do you want to know? What are you thinking about? What issues are most on top of mind for you as you start to vote? So let us know, and let us know again if you voted already. We'd be interested to hear that as well. Let's talk about we talked about the governor's race briefly. Let's talk about the congressional race because you brought it up. Some of the national midterms that are going on. Again, given the dynamics, the Senate is 50-50 with, of course, because the Democrats control the White House, they get the tie-breaking vote. So Republicans only have to flip one seat to win the Senate, and they have to only flip 5 seats on the House side to win control. So, I think the math speaks to the fact that this is going to be really, really close, but the data also speaks to this being a really tough fight for the Democrats. They have to basically hold serve in a lot of these seats to maintain power in Washington. That is going to be a tall task. And that does include, we should say, a couple of seats in New Hampshire and certainly the 2nd District of Maine. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, the Senate looks like a coin flip right now, and obviously we don't have any here in Maine. We don't have any races there, but there's a semi-competitive one in New Hampshire. Although it looks like the Democratic incumbent Maggie Hassan is the favorite, but here in Maine, the 2nd District is right in the middle of all that, and it looks like the House is it's kind of being moved further and further toward the Republicans' column. They're gaining ground here in the last few days, but that 2nd District seat, I think I saw today, has already been the subject of like the 5th most outside spending. It's only going to gain. The parties are invested. They're going to be on basically even footing by the end of this. So the Republicans are really betting that the national environment is going to swing that their way. And what's interesting about the 2nd District is we now have such polarization between the 2nd District and the 1st District that a statewide election could look totally different than what it looks like in the 2nd District. So Jared Golden, right, even if it's through no fault of his own, he's positioned himself pretty well for a Democrat in that district. But but he could be dragged down if things go pretty hard to the right. So he's certainly in danger.
Yeah, and Mike, I get asked a lot. I'm sure you do too. How much stock I put into the polls,
Yeah.
and I'm curious what your answer is to that before I maybe weigh in myself.
Well, we paid for polls in 2020, and they were better than most, but still very wrong, right? And
And you're talking the Gideon Collins race that year.
yeah, right, chiefly, right. And so look, they're important. I use them to gauge direction. What's really funny about it is that you hear about campaigns say don't worry about those polls, but they're doing the same thing behind the scenes trying to get a read of the race, and very often the things you see in public match up very well with what they're seeing in private. So there's a lot of kind of machismo about how people look at these things. But I think what we're learning about polling is that it's getting harder and harder to do. The campaigns are seeing that. We're seeing that. We're trying to be transparent with with viewers and readers, right, as we kind of all experience this. But look, the reality remains this: there's no other way to evaluate what's going on in the electorate, in a way that's better than a poll. You can go around the state talking to voters all you want, but you're gonna see a skewed view of things no matter where you go. So look, I think you don't treat them as gospel, but you certainly look at them, you gauge direction, you're skeptical, but there's no other tool like them.
Yeah, I have a very similar answer.
Mhm.
And I think I was on the radio the other day, basically equating it to like, if you want a poll to be an Instagram worthy photo, it's not that. It is not crystal clear, with great lighting that you want to throw
Yeah.
up, in your feed. It's more like sort of an abstract painting. That's,
Right.
that's a little bit off, but it still gives you an outline. It still is a painting. It still is a picture of what's going on. It's just don't expect it to be in sharp focus necessarily, because there's some, whether it's bias in terms of how people answer, or whether
That's right.
it's flaws in the methodology and who they're asking, and who they may be oversampling or undersampling based on their parties. And frankly, it's a challenge nowadays when who has a landline versus a cell phone. Obviously, an older voter, who, by the way, is more likely to vote historically, is also the one more likely to have a landline. So how you conduct those polls, I don't pretend to know all the science of it, but it's gotten only more complicated, I think, in the current environment with all the technology and the way people, frankly, are distrustful about polls, or distrustful about necessarily, at least some parts of the electorate are, revealing how they really feel. And I think that's something you got to take into account as you're sort of weighing these polls.
That's right.
So that's my thought on that too. So very similar to what you were saying, Mike. Hey, I also popped up just now for the people who are joining us. This is actually from the Bangor Daily News today. You did something very interesting today, Mike, where you were sort of breaking down, we were talking about the economy being such a critical issue in all the races, and including in the main race for governor. You were kind of breaking down the numbers in a really interesting way. Can we talk about that for a second?
I mean, what's really hard about what's easy about this race, and what's hard about it, right? The easy part is that we have two governors who have really long records, right? We've got 8 years of LePage, we've got 4 years of Governor Mills. The problem is, right, that the economy has just changed so fundamentally during the pandemic. So you're trying to sort out, this campaign is really all about, right, whether Republicans can kind of stick the bad parts of the economic figures, right, to the Democrats, and how Democrats kind of respond to that. So I go through a few measures here. This one is about the labor force participation rate, how that's really declined. It obviously fell off like it did everywhere else during the pandemic, down to about 58% of Mainers, and then
that's
tick back up, and then it's, as you see, it's continuing to tick back up nationally on a, generally. And but since about April 2021, it's stalled out again, and we're back down almost to the pre-pandemic, the worst of the, when everything was closed down.
Yeah, so that's pretty stark, Mike. That's interesting to see that number.
Yeah, and we quote an economist in there that kind of goes into that a little bit, and he thinks that this measure has become basically less valuable with the in-migration to Maine, with the changes between sectors, the kind of the way that the pandemic has changed the economy, and you have to look at, Maine's had some better trends on GDP growth.
Yep.
There's wage growth, so it's an interesting, the pandemic. I think he's right that the pandemic has kind of screwed with things a little bit in a way that people are going to be trying to figure out for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And interesting to say, again, I know this has been in fact, there was kind of an off-color moment, for, if you want to put it that way, for Governor LePage, where one of the earlier debates, he was asked about the budget surplus that the state has been running under Governor Mills, and the fact that she was able to, sort of refund in a dramatic way, frankly, the rainy day fund.
Right.
And he basically had that line where he said, well, Governor Mills should be thankful there was a COVID-19 pandemic because it allowed her to, his point was that a lot of this is federal dollars that are propping up, economies and state budgets, Maine's included. And he's right about that. I'm not sure that was the best way to phrase that.
Well, we should this graph in front of us. Yeah, this graph in front of us shows that, right? So what you have on the bottom line there is the actual state spending there under LePage Mills, and what you see is that it stays relatively flat. Basically, it goes annual spending on just the state budget. So what you and I pay in taxes, other things like that, goes from $3 billion to $4 billion per year, and the top one is an inflation adjusted measure of that. Then you go all the way up to the federal, to all spending, federal included. I mean, LePage never got very far above $8 billion total. Governor Mills got almost up to $12 billion in the last full fiscal year. So this is a big story, right? That big part of what Maine has been able to do, and every other state for that matter too. We got a ton of money. There were enhanced unemployment benefits flowing through the tax system, right? We were getting revenue from that. There's all sorts of things that, and there was a big tranche of direct aid, and so what you see here is that that it's not really the state spending. It's not really what you and I pay in state taxes. It's just this giant bump in overall spending driven by the federal that is that's changing things here.
This graphic you and your team at BDM put together really highlights that really well, frankly. Just how much this green line shooting up is federal dollars flowing into the state. But these are the things that I think matter. If we're going to talk about the economy and I know that Governor Mills is trying to say, look, the economy's been really strong under my leadership. And Governor LePage is saying, no, the economy is really strong under my leadership. And so it's been an interesting dynamic to see, because I think, like everywhere, when it comes to numbers, it feels like if you want to point to this number, you can tell one story. If you want to point to that number, you can maybe tell a different story. It really depends on which number you're highlighting and exactly how you're looking at it to make your argument.
And that's politics right there.
It's politics.
It's and there's no one great measure of an economy, especially now, right? We have think, a lot of this is based on surveys, polls even that are lagging a little bit, and you're trying to capture current trends, but you're a little bit behind. So, it's an interesting, there's a lot of interesting ways to look at the economy, and we know when it's good, we know when it's bad. Right now, we've got a mix of the good with the bad, right? People are struggling with these high costs, and all this contributes to that feeling.
And we had a couple of weird stats thanks Jake for joining in. Jake says this new East Coast diesel shortage is really concerning.
Absolutely.
That definitely is concerning. I mean, if you talk about supply chain issues, which is another issue that came up in the pandemic, and you talk about costs because of those problems, if diesel's short and we can't ship goods and obviously Maine is, historically, except for the things that we can bring into the ports, we're highly dependent on the roads. And we're at the end of the line, in a sense, for a lot of these things that are being shipped in, and a lot of them coming in by truck. So if diesel costs are really high, obviously that's going to have inflationary pressure too. That's not a good sign. So I think Jake brings up a great point about that. Let us know. Again, we appreciate those who are jumping into the comments. We appreciate anyone joining us. Once again, if you're just tuning into our live stream here, it's Gregg here from CBS 13, Mike Shepard from the BDN. Again, we sort of partnered up over the last couple of weeks with some of the debates that you've seen, or at least one of the debates that you've seen. And we've done a couple of these. This will be our third time that we've sort of jumped in and waded into the political social media waters to see what you're thinking about and what you're talking about and what you want to hear from us. So please feel free to jump into the comments. Let us know what issue you care about and what you're thinking about. Karen jumps in right now. She says, I watched the debate between LePage and Mills. I didn't see a whole lot on the COVID vaccine mandate. Any insight on that? Appreciate the question, Karen. And she clarifies, for healthcare workers or otherwise, because I was going to answer that in one part that there was an answer in our debate about a vaccine mandate for students, if they were going to add it to the regimen or the recommended regimen for kids. And they both said no, which I thought was interesting, that they would not sign off on recommending it or requiring it, adding it to the things that are already required, like rubella and whooping cough and things like that.
Right. Governor Mills said that at this time.
At the time.
Yeah.
So I jump in there, Mike, too. I mean, she was asking too about healthcare workers.
Well, healthcare workers, that was very controversial, right? Governor Mills put a vaccine was one of the first to put a vaccine mandate in for healthcare workers. I think what you got to remember now, though, is that there's a federal mandate in effect for places that get Medicare and Medicaid dollars. Right. So the fact that Maine has a vaccine mandate for these workers right now is kind of, it was a big deal when it was done. It was a really controversial thing. But it's sort of superseded, right, by this federal one now at the time. Yeah. That has been ruled constitutional, by the way, right? It's gone through the court system. The President Biden, right, had another vaccine mandate for big companies that's been struck down so far. So there's been wrangling over that, but you got to remember the federal one on that front.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Mike, but I've been struck by the pandemic and how the state handled the pandemic. I thought if you were to ask me 6 months ago, hey, rank other than inflation and the economy, what's going to be the number 2 issue in this election, in particular for the governor's race, I would have guessed it was the handling of the pandemic. What Paul LePage says he would have done differently, what Janet Mills did. If Janet Mills was going to accuse Paul LePage, if he had been in office at the time, that would have been disastrous for people who are vulnerable as far as their health risks, and whether Paul LePage would claim this was a disaster for businesses in the economy of the state of Maine, Mills was a failure. I thought we'd see more of that. Certainly we have seen some of that, but I don't think it's anywhere close to what I thought we might see, flashing back 6 months or so ago.
Yeah, I think we saw a lot of that, frankly, like more about a year ago when the pandemic was still at the top of mind. I mean, you got to remember a little under a year ago, December 2021 really was the worst time in the pandemic here in Maine. Hospitals were getting full. We were in a pretty rough situation, and it seems like after that the next waves of vaccines kicked in, and it became much less of a political issue. And I don't really think we haven't heard too much. I'm checking myself because I think there may have been an exchange or two in at least one of the debates, but it didn't come up really in our debate. And I think they would have handled the pandemic differently. But you've also got Governor Mills was making the decisions at the time. Former Governor LePage, right, can kind of Monday morning quarterback that a little bit, right? And there's a lot of, and that's and that would happen during any campaign when a big issue happens. But it's just a fact that she was at a disadvantage, to a certain degree, by having to actually deal with the things in real time. And I think it would be the same if the roles were reversed.
I think so too. I mean, I think I used the analogy early, like a year or so ago. I think I called it sort of like building the airplane once you're already in the air. It was sort of how you had to try and respond to this. This is something no one in our lifetimes had gone through. I mean, it had been a century since the last, pandemic like this. And I'm not sure what kind of lessons we were able to learn from what was going on in 1919, 1920, and 1921 or so. Right. I did think that was going to be a bigger issue than it turned out to be, but I think it speaks to what you were saying there, Mike. I think that it was a bigger issue a year ago. It's certainly not a non-issue at all right now, but it's not what's top of mind for people. I think part of that is maybe pandemic fatigue. We're tired of it, frankly. We're tired of thinking about it. We're tired of talking about it. I think it matters at a certain level. I think it definitely is instructive to look at what happened and how Maine emerged from that, the strengths and weaknesses. We did talk about, as I jump to this topic, the impact of the pandemic on education and the lags and deficits we're seeing when it comes to testing of our kids. That's for sure. And we did talk about that in the debate, that Mike and I moderated. But anyway, I think that it's an important issue, but the economy is always number one. I mean, what is the line from way back to James Carville in 1992? It's the economy, stupid. And we've heard that sentence multiple times in these elections as well. So
that's right.
Hey, let's see if we got some more comments coming in. Hey, I wanted to share this too with folks. One of the things that is been percolating was we saw. Oh, well, let me get to Troy's question here too. Troy is jumping in from Augusta. My issue is abortion rights. I think women should have abortion if something bad happens or something else serious. It should just be between her and her doctor. Thank you, Troy, for jumping in on that. Clearly, that is an issue for a second. Well, actually, I think national polls have abortion fifth on the rank of things people care about the most, behind inflation and economic issues in general.
Yeah.
And I think education was in the top 5 as well, but it's up there for sure. We did see a rally today in Portland, actually, Monument Square, that I know Shelley Pingree attended, Governor Mills attended, some other, I think Ryan Fecteau, the State House Speaker, attended that as well. So that's definitely an issue. I think they actually called it Roe-vember rally for abortion rights, the event they had today. So yeah, to Troy's question, I think abortion is a sizable issue. Certainly it's one that Democrats are hoping is a sizable issue as they try and make sure that, as with any elections, who's voting is as important as what people care about. If you care about something and you're not going to the polls to exercise, to act on that concern, well, then that's a vote lost for that side. So I think that you always hear so much about Go TV, get out the vote. I think that's a major, major issue. And certainly Democrats are hoping abortion is a driver in this election.
Yeah, it's been a unifying one for them. I mean, it was you see in the polls that it's really Democrats that are, sort of everyone is worried about the inflation in the economy, but Republicans are more ginned up by it. But it looks like Democrats are even more ginned up as a percentage by the abortion issue. So it's no surprise that we're seeing that here in the last week.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to see if I can jump in and show this for a second too. So speaking of abortion, because Troy brought up the topic, this is a political ad that's running right now, paid for by the Democratic Governors Association for the most part. But let me see. I'll just play this for a split second, and then we'll kind of react to this for a moment.
In Maine, our independence, hard work, and freedoms mean everything, but not to Paul LePage. He's repeatedly attacked women's reproductive freedom. LePage supported letting states ban abortion with no exceptions for rape or incest, defunded family planning programs, and told extremists we shouldn't have abortion. He's a risk to our health and freedom.
So there's that ad that's playing right now that speaks to that issue, and it speaks to what we were just talking about as well. That Democrats want to make this front and center. They are spending money on this as one of their more frequent ads that they're running right now in rotation, because they want this to be the message that voters are taking away. Actually, full disclosure, I did a little bit of what's called a truth tracker on this. Actually, that's a better view. I'm sort of playing with. I'm literally controlling the buttons here right now, so I can make Mike and I really big, or I can do that, which I think is better. But anyway, so let us know what you're thinking. But so I did what's called a truth tracker on that ad, and I've looked at some that were attacking Janet Mills. I looked at that ad, which is attacking Paula Page in recent weeks, last couple of weeks or so. We actually found the video from 2016 where then Governor LePage said, if we can save those lives, meaning that children who are being aborted or fetuses, his quote was that we shouldn't have abortion. So he said it. He's on record. We have the tapes. The question is, again, where does he stand on the issue? He has said it repeatedly on the campaign trail now that I was in office for 8 years and never once took action to change abortion laws in Maine. Democrats are trying to make this an issue. If you look at my record is that yes, I'm pro-life. I would, in his words, I would prefer adoption to abortion, but I've never tried to change the law when I was governor, and I won't. And in fact, he said he'd veto in efforts to enact, some of the federal things that were on the table, like a 15-week abortion post 15-week abortion ban. But Democrats clearly want to say, well, okay, you're saying that now, but you were saying that then, and we want voters to focus on that, what you were saying when you were in office.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, and you've got to match up what he said in the past, and it's messy, frankly, right? Like these things do not match up neatly, and Republicans have really not much incentive, right, to lay out exactly what they would do if they were to get power. Look, Maine is a state that's culturally liberal, for the most part. It has permissive abortion laws that date back decades now. It doesn't make sense for them to say what they're going to do. I think there is a faction of Republicans that would come in and want to do something with abortion laws. Now, what LePage would do with them if he had full control of Augusta, he's saying what he says he'll do, but maybe it's a different calculation, right? If Republicans have the power, they have no power, right, in Augusta effectively right now, except when it comes to certain budget issues and there are no votes. But so right now they've got to win power back to to have the good problem, right, of having to deal with this. But
Having to
yeah, I mean,
legislate on that, yeah.
I think they're going to have to, if they win the legislature back, if they do win the Blaine House, there's going to have to be some heavy prioritizing on their part. They're not going to want to be a one-term majority, right? LePage has been there and done that, and the rest of the tenure didn't really go all that smoothly, right? So that's they're going to have to work out those priorities if they get there. I don't know exactly what I think would happen. So that's
let's speak on that for just a moment here, Mike. And again, we welcome everyone who's sort of watching. And the way these things work is that this will sort of live online too. So I know some of you may watch this after. This is the live session right now. This is going to be on our social media pages for the next week or so. So some of you may be watching this after it's live here on our Tuesday evening. But regardless, thank you for jumping in and letting us know what you care about, what you're thinking about. We should say a quick word, though, as you bring it up here, Mike, about control of the power in Augusta. Right now, Democrats have a 9-seat majority in the Senate. I believe they have a 13-seat majority in the House. I think so. Back to the Senate side, 22-13, I think is the number. That's percentage-wise, that's a larger flip than what we'd need to see in the House side for Republicans to win back control.
Yeah, I mean, the conventional wisdom this time around, usually the Senate is seen as the more competitive chamber, and it's certainly competitive this time around. But most of the people who look at this think it's more likely to remain with the Democrats. The House has really gotten competitive. Both of them are really competitive, but the House really is more primed to flip. That's really based on the math of redistricting. The average seat got just more Republican, and
which is fascinating because just to stop you on that for a second, Mike, because I'm fascinated by this, is that we hear about gerrymandering in a lot of districts, in a lot of states, I should say, where if one party controls Pennsylvania, North Carolina, those are a couple of great examples. Actually, gerrymandering happened in New York as well. Democrats control things there. In North Carolina, Republicans control the state house. So a lot of the gerrymandering that's happening is really, hey, if you're the party in power once every decade, you essentially get to be in charge of redrawing the maps, which to me sounds crazy that you're giving the person in power the right to decide how much more power they can have. But that's the way our system works. But Maine, the Democrats were in charge, had the power in the state house at the time of redistricting based on the 2020 census. And yet the data I've seen shows that they actually, I don't think, did a great job at least in terms of their own power in drawing some of these district maps.
Well, you got to remember, Greg, that we have a bipartisan redistricting
Correct.
process here.
Yeah, that's right.
So you need to get Democrats and Republicans to agree, or else the plan goes to the courts and they decide what
that's correct. I know Dave Emery, for example, is a name that gets thrown around. Somebody on the Democratic
former
side.
Congressman. He was on the Republican side, right?
No, I'm sorry. Former congressman. Right.
Right.
So it's almost like
he was their guru on that. Yeah.
There's like a handful of people who seem to have this arcane knowledge about how to draw. Although I think it's getting easier with all the data that you can plug into a computer system, and into some software, you can get stuff spit out.
We were writing our own districts as we were trying to figure it out, and it's actually a relatively simple coding job.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up too. I did overstate the fact that the gerrymandering, actually, I like our system, frankly. It's much less likely to have gerrymandering.
Yeah, Maine system is why there is no gerrymandering. It's a
bipartisan
process that the Democrats in Congress have actually wanted to emulate by putting in bipartisan redistricting processes. So it is fair. It still leads to some odd results, like sometimes independents in the legislature get their districts broken up. Because it is controlled by the parties, but all in all, gets both sides to buy in, and it adds up to fairer maps generally. Yeah,
that's right. So again, I think you're right. I think if you break down the data, at least, I spent literally 10 minutes with somebody doing this the other day, so I don't pretend to be a master of this. I know you spent a lot more time doing this. It does look like the competitive districts in many cases in the House side sort of went a little bit more red than they had been, which is interesting. To whether or not this get flipped. It could get flipped, and that's something we'll be watching on election night for sure. You guys have a great. I'm going to give a plug. I want to always give a plug to our website. Our websites, I think we do a great job. The BDN has a great website, especially when it comes to around election time. You guys, I know you guys put a ton of effort into it too, Mike.
Oh yeah, no, it's gonna be. We're doing our final meetings tomorrow, and we've got some bells and whistles coming that should help make things clearer. So looking forward to it.
Well, good stuff. Well, we're coming up on, gosh, this has been flying by. We've been on at this for about 40 minutes or so, looks like, or closing in on 40 minutes. So I really want to say thank you to everyone who's been jumping in, especially on a random Tuesday night here, at 8 o'clock at night or so. And again, for those of you maybe watching this later and not live, again, this is just for perspective, it's 8:20 on Tuesday night, 1 week before the election, to sort of put a pin in what live means right now. So if you're watching this later, please feel free to jump in the comments, because we do review this later. So if you're seeing this after we're actually live, go ahead and jump into the comments anyway. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know about what issues you care about the most, because we do take that to heart. I mean, we said it a week or so ago, Mike, or like more than a week ago, as we were preparing for the debate. We do take into account what people are saying, based on polls, certainly, but also based on what people, our viewers and readers and listeners are saying on social media, what they care about. We take that to heart.
Oh yeah, I mean, it allows me to have kind of a check on the polls. You just want to take everything in and try to and we'll go and sleep on all this tonight, right? And
Yep.
and try to figure out. Hopefully, if you're watching this after election day, hopefully we were right in everything we discussed today. But we know that's a hard task. So I'm fully prepared to be wrong. Yeah.
The one thing Mike and I have avoided during this 45 minutes or so that we've been doing this is predictions. I don't know about you, Mike. I am not one to give predictions very often. I think I leave that to pundits. I don't think of myself as a pundit. I think of myself as a journalist. So yeah. I'm not really in the prediction game. I know generally speaking, I think that's where you feel as well. But let's throw it out there, I guess. I'll ask, you have any bold predictions, either about turnout or about any outcomes or anything you'll be watching? Maybe that's a better way to phrase it on election day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like making hard predictions either. But look, I mean, I think what we're seeing in the polls is that Janet Mills is a favorite over Paul LePage. It would be an upset if he won. It looks like a true toss up to me in the 2nd district. The legislature, the House is a toss up. Senate maybe tilts a little Democratic, but there's an amazing amount of money being spent there as well. I mean, there's
like the Senate District 1. We have
one race, the Northern Aroostook County seat. There's already been $1 million spent there, which is unprecedented. The previous record for a race like that was around, around maybe 500,000 or so. Yeah. So it's doubled it up. So, and that's just going to keep happening, right? More and more, we're going to see these massive races. And I've been talking to people, how do you even spend that much on one state Senate race in Aroostook County, right? So it's pretty amazing, and we're just going to keep pushing all the thresholds when it comes to money. That's not going back in the back.
This,
where we are.
And I know, I mean, I guess that's the good news, as we say, it's 1 week out into the election day. That means we're like less than a week out from when these ads end. You can get your internet and your television back, and your websites back. So, but in the meantime, there's a lot of ads being spent. And historically, my understanding, because we obviously look into the TV ads in particular, historically, Maine is viewed as being a relatively cheap place to buy if you're an outside group. I mean, you do have to buy 3 different markets if you want to get into the 2nd district, for example, because the Portland, Maine market, we have a lot of, in fact, CBS 13 has really strong viewership in the Lewiston, Auburn, Oxford County area. Obviously Bangor, you'd almost want to consider, although Bangor technically is the 2nd largest city in the 2nd district behind Lewiston, it's still kind of viewed as the hub of the 2nd district. And then of course you have a WAGM territory up there in Aroostook County. So to buy the 2nd district, you sort of have to buy 3 different television markets. But the national people look at them as being inexpensive, relatively speaking.
Oh yeah, and they are. But as we see these big races come in, the price, as you know better than I do, Greg, the price of advertising just goes. The more buyers there are, the more jammed the airwaves get. The prices just go up and up and
Supply
up.
and demand, but yeah.
And campaigns, right? They always get the lowest rate. So the third party, so when you see a Janet Mills ad or a Paul LePage ad, they actually paid less for it than an outside group that's attacking Janet Mills or Paul LePage.
Correct.
So you got to remember that as well. The candidates always get the lowest rate, but that doesn't mean they always get the time that they want, right?
That's correct. So, to lift the veil on that, again, a political. I mean, by the way, my side of the building is literally the opposite side of the building from the salespeople and the business.
Right, we don't talk to them. Yeah,
and we like that kind of clear line there. But Yeah,
We love them,
there's
but we don't talk to them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll say hi over the water cooler and the coffee makers. There's some very nice people up there. I want to be clear. There's some great hardworking people on the sales side. But generally speaking, for these kind of things, yeah, we separation of church and state, as it were. But there's something called a preemptible rate, which means that if a campaign can, as you mentioned, they can get the cheapest rate available by law. And but if they want to lock into a time frame, like let's say they want halftime of the Patriots game, for example, or first quarter of the Patriots game, they're buying a non-preemptible rate, which means they do pay a higher fee. So I only know that because I've studied political ads, not because I work at a television station. Although obviously there's some bleed over there a little bit in terms of my access to the files. I only have to walk down the hall, which, by the way, those are public files. Anyone can walk into our building and request those files. I just have a shorter walk than you do to get to them. So anyway, that's a little bit of an insight into how those political ads work. But yeah, the good news is if you're tired of them, they'll be off the air in less than a week. So we're ready to move on, and I'm sure you are as well. So any final thoughts, Mike, before I guess we wrap this up?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've summed up kind of where we think things are, and the next week we'll see how everyone's framing it. It looks like the candidates are going to be out there pounding the pavement. I know Janet Mills was up at 5 a.m. at the Old Town Hunters Breakfast. She was on the stage at the State Theater at a rally at about 10 p.m. in a Wonder Woman costume over the weekend,
Right.
and Paul LePage is doing the same thing. I mean, he's in Oregon tonight. These guys are going to be hitting it really hard and trying to be as visible as possible, I think, between.
Yeah, I know. I
next
put
Tuesday.
in long days around as we get closer to elections, and I know you do too. But I got to take my hat off to, frankly, the candidates and their staffers. They put in some crazy hours during a campaign like this. So hopefully they're getting some rest at some point. But yeah, crunch time is every minute they're sleeping, I guess, is 1 minute they're not talking to a voter. So there you go. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate. Oh, and Troy. Well, I'll go ahead and answer this quickly. Troy's asking, will WGME to be doing coverage on election night? The short answer is, oh yeah. So a couple of things we'll be doing. In fact, Mike, I think, is going to join me election night briefly. So we're going to be doing some stuff election night here online. You can watch us on our websites. You can watch us on social media. We'll be doing cut-ins, we call them. There'll be network programming going on during the evening, but we'll be breaking in with updates throughout the evening as well. I know the polls close at 8 o'clock. We'll have an update around then. We'll have an update at 8:25. We'll have updates like basically every half hour. And then we'll have a full hour of news on Fox 23 at 10 and a half hour at 11. And I know, again, you guys are going nonstop on the BDN, and you guys will be on social media as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be in the Bangor newsroom, and we'll be doing some stuff on our channels too. Some Facebook lives with some of our pundits on the opinion side. So I'll be kind of breaking over here to WGME, and we'll be that's kind of before we start the votes start coming in, and then we actually have to do our real jobs, right?
Yeah,
and, try to figure out who won, right? And
I will make only one prediction right now, and that's I think that there's a decent chance that second district race is not decided on election night itself because of ranked choice. That obviously one of the candidates has to get to 50%. If they don't, you then go to ranked choice. The Tiffany Bond is the independent. It'd be obviously a big shocker if she were to be anything other than third after the first round. So I don't think, my personal prediction is that we're not going to know the second district at election night, and it'll go to ranked choice.
I'm with you there. I think that's a relatively safe one. She's
been polling up
at what, 6 to 8%. And
Tiffany Bond, which is just enough to make sure somebody else isn't at 50.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your time. Appreciate you jumping in and joining us here on Facebook Live at WGME.com, on our Twitter channel. I don't know what else. I don't think we're on Twitch yet, but maybe we should add that at some point.
Next time, 2 years from now, we will be.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure. All right, Michael Shepard, Gregg Lagerquist, we really appreciate you guys joining us here tonight. And again, if you haven't voted already, we know that 1/6 of you probably already have, but Election Day 1 week from tonight. Stay with CBS 13 and the Bangor Daily News now through Election Day for complete coverage. It's your voice, your future. Thanks for joining us tonight.